My stepfather punched me. In the face. At his birthday party. In front of 60 people. The glass of wine I spilled on his expensive suit hadn't even hit the floor when his fist smashed into my cheekbone. My head jerked sideways, I crashed into a dessert cart, blood splattered on white tablecloths, and then he screamed, "Stupid maid, clean this up, I wasn't the maid. I was his stepdaughter." No one stopped him, no one helped me. And when my mother finally came over, I thought she would hold me. I thought she would scream at him. Instead, she looked me in the eye and said, "Apologize to your stepfather, or leave." So I left. I walked out barefoot and bleeding past the chandeliers and the silence and the stairs. No one ran after me, not even her. But when they got home, 89 missed calls. What were they so desperate to say? And why did my stepfather end up begging me to speak just weeks later, live on national television? This isn't a revenge story. This is the story of the last time I let anyone hit me and walk away like nothing happened. Hi, I'm Marin, and for a long time I kept this story quiet. But not anymore. Before I share what happened next, I'd love to know you're here with me. Just comment listening, or tell me where you're from. Sometimes knowing someone is out there, even just one person, makes all the difference. And if you've ever been hurt and told to stay silent, this story is for you. Don't forget to subscribe. This story deserves to be heard. Thank you. Now let me tell you everything. The chandeliers cast a golden glow across the marble foyer of the Hawthorne estate, bouncing off the ornate white columns and the oil paintings of dead men who all looked vaguely disappointed. It was December in Savannah, moist and cold, the kind of chill that settled in your bones and never quite left. The kind of night when silk clung to skin and lies hung heavier than perfume. My mother Evelina adjusted my neckline with fingers too sharp to be tender. "You look presentable," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "Not me." "Please, Zinnia. Just don't embarrass us." The use never included me. It meant her Thaddeus and his lineage of polished ghosts. I was the scratch on the antique mirror. The reminder that Evelina once lived in a world without silver candelabras and monogrammed napkins. I nodded. What else could I do? I had done everything right. Black dress, closed-toe heels, hair tucked back into a chignon. Quiet, compliant. I had even arrived early as instructed. Still, I could feel the weight of their gaze before I even stepped fully into the ballroom. Thaddeus Hawthorne was turning 65. The ballroom buzzed with Savannah's most polished predators. Judges, art dealers, heiresses with champagne laughter. Jasper, my husband Thaddeus's only son, stood near the hearth, drink in hand, looking as if he were hoping to be invisible. When he met my eyes, he gave a small shrug. His way of telling me to blend in, fade. I didn't want to be noticed. I didn't want to serve drinks, but the staff was short, and I was told to make myself useful, so I took the tray. It was stupid, I know that now. I had no business walking on that rug in heels, with crystal stemware balanced like a tightrope on one hand. I never saw the corner of the Persian rug rise, but I felt it, how my foot caught, how my knee buckled. The tray tipped, the red wine spilled, and time split open like a wound. Gasps. One woman clutched her pearls so hard I thought they might snap. The wine splashed directly onto Thaddeus's white dinner jacket, a deep blooming stain so red, so loud in a room full of gold and ivory. He didn't speak. He just stared at me with the fury of a man who'd never been told no. Then his hand came across my face like a gavel. The slap cracked through the room. I stumbled back, landing hard on the polished wood floor. My lips split. I tasted blood before I felt it. "Stupid little maid," he spat. "Clean it up." No one moved. I scanned the room. Evelina sipped her wine as if this were routine. Jasper stared into the fireface, unreadable. Not one guest stepped forward. "Zinnia," my mother said, her voice flat. "You should apologize, or leave." Blood dripped onto the floor, one drop, then another, pooling into the dark grain of the wood. I rose slowly, grabbed a silk napkin from the buffet table and dabbed my lip. Then I crouched, pressed the cloth against the floorboards and wiped. When I stood again, I looked each of them in the eye. The judge, the heiress, the woman still clenching her pearls. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I walked out past the crystal, the laughter, the judgment, carrying the blood-stained silk napkin in my hand like a flag. A small rebellion. A first step. The cold followed me home. My apartment near Forsyth Park was never meant to be permanent. It was a space between other people's expectations, a studio with warped wood floors and windows that creaked in the wind. A place I had told myself was freedom, but mostly felt like waiting. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Didn't bother turning on the light. The silence hit first, then the weight of the night. I dropped my clutch on the floor and sank onto the couch. The silk napkin, still crumpled in my hand, was stiff with dried blood. I unfolded it carefully, holding it to the light. It looked like a confession. I turned on my phone. 89 missed calls. Evelina, Jasper, Thaddeus. I played the voicemails. Evelina. You humiliated this family, Zinnia. You need to fix it before it spreads. Jasper. I know it was awful. I do. But he's under pressure. This auction coming up, it's a lot for him. You made it worse. Thaddeus. You open your mouth to anyone, and I will bury you in legal hell. Understand me, girl? You will be nothing. I turned the phone off. In the darkness, I felt every syllable of those messages settle like dust in my lungs. The part that hurt the most wasn't the threats. It was the silence at the party. The room full of people who let me bleed so that Thaddeus wouldn't have to apologize. This wasn't the first time. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a worn leather notebook, something I had kept since I was 21. I hadn't opened it in years. Page after page of small angry script. Don't let her sit near the French clients. Her accent ruins the brand. She should be grateful we let her wear designer gowns. On her, they look counterfeit. The ink smudges reminded me that I used to cry after writing these things down. I didn't cry now. I turned to the last page. Blank, clean, waiting. I picked up a pen. December 12th. My blood on their floor. My silence ends tonight. I closed the book, walked to the small fireproof safe beside my desk, placed the notebook inside along with the napkin and locked it. My fingers trembled not with fear but with clarity. This time I wouldn't hide behind velvet curtains and careful words. I wouldn't explain away bruises with politeness. They had written my story long enough. Now I would hold the pen. The cafe sat on the corner of Barnard and Whitaker, a place tucked beneath live oaks whose branches tangled like old secrets. Whitaker's had always smelled of scorched cinnamon and burnt espresso, a scent I once found comforting. Jasper and I used to come here during the early days of our marriage, back when silences between us were soft instead of sharp. When I walked in, the windows were fogged, the place half empty except for a couple of students tapping away at laptops. I spotted Jasper immediately seated at the far table by the frosted glass, wearing a camel-colored coat and the same watch his father had gifted him on his 30th birthday. I slid into the seat across from him, my coat still damp from the mist. We didn't hug. He didn't ask how I was. Instead, we sat in the same stifling pause that had grown between us over the past year. I wasn't going to come, I said quietly, but I needed to look you in the eye when I asked. Jasper's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. Ask what? Why you didn't do anything. That night. He looked down. I didn't know he was going to hit you. But you didn't look surprised. I was shocked. No, you were silent. You didn't even flinch. Jasper finally met my gaze. You know what he's like, Zinnia. He doesn't do well with embarrassment. You spilled red wine on him, in front of everyone. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So I deserved it, I didn't say that, he said, voice low. But you escalated it. I bled on the floor, Jasper. I wiped it up while everyone watched, including you. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. Inside, someone steamed milk behind the counter. I reached into my bag and pulled out the leather-bound notebook, my record of every slight, every humiliation. I want you to read this. He glanced at it, reluctant. I pushed it across the table. He flipped through a few pages, then stopped. You've been keeping notes. I was trying to survive. He shut the notebook and slid it back. You're being dramatic. Am I? Everyone in that house has to deal with Thaddeus. He's intense. He demands perfection. You think you're the only one who's ever felt pressure? No, I said slowly. But I may be the only one who didn't bow. Maybe you should have, he muttered. Sometimes peace is more important than pride. It hit harder than I expected. All the nights I'd told myself Jasper was just caught in the middle, that he didn't agree with his father, but didn't know how to stand up to him. Now I saw it clearly. He wasn't caught. He was comfortable. I stood, leaving my untouched coffee behind. If staying with you means learning to be silent in the face of abuse, I said, then I choose solitude. He blinked. So what, you're walking away? I already did. The moment none of you stood up for me. Where will you go? Where I can be heard. I turned and walked out, the bell above the door a final punctuation. The cold air met my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk, my breath rising like smoke. I didn't look back. I left behind a husband and a hollow promise of family. And for the first time I felt like I was stepping towards something instead of running from it. The cold in Savannah had taken on a different sharpness since the party. The air felt heavier, not because of temperature, but because of what hung in it: suspicion, whispers, and something I hadn't felt since childhood: fear. I returned to my apartment, which once felt like a safe house, now a cell. The shadows on the walls stretched longer than they used to. I barely slept. At night I would scroll through social media only to find strange messages, anonymous accounts commenting on my posts. Gold digger, ungrateful leech. You'll regret this. Some messages were more disturbing. One simply read, "Careful where you bleed next time." I didn't respond. I just locked all my accounts and changed passwords. Still, the unease crept under my skin like the damp. Then came the email. Sent from a legal firm in Atlanta, Harper Baines and Lowe, on behalf of Thaddeus Hawthorne. The subject line: pending legal action, cease and desist. The message was cold and clinical. If I spoke to anyone about the alleged incident at Thaddeus's birthday party, I could be sued for defamation. They had attached a draft lawsuit, formal language accusations of slander, and a restraining order requesting that I be barred from all Hawthorne events and properties. It felt like a hand pressed to my mouth. I printed the email and folded it into my coat pocket. The next day, I walked to a small legal aid office near the university campus. A young woman in a gray blazer met me in the cramped waiting area. She skimmed the email and the attached documents, her expression darkening. "You understand that if this goes to court," she said, "and you don't have hard evidence, he'll crush you. His legal team has a reputation. You could lose everything: your apartment, your job, if they push for damages." I nodded. "Do you have proof?" I didn't answer. Just pressed my lips together and stood to leave. The sky was overcast as I walked back downtown. I needed air, but the air felt thick. I wandered until my feet brought me to an old bookstore off Monterey Square, one I hadn't visited in years. The bell chimed softly as I entered. Inside, the scent of paper and dust greeted me. I ran my fingers along the spines, trying to ground myself. "That you, Zinnia Everly?" I turned to see an older woman behind the counter, white hair piled on her head like a crown. Her voice was sharp, but her eyes held something else. "I used to know your mother," she said, "back when she worked retail." I gave a tight smile. "Small town. You look tired." "I am." She stepped around the counter, her gait steady despite the cane. "I'm Loretta," she said. "I practiced law for 30 years, retired now. But I once took a case against Thaddeus Hawthorne, nearly lost my license over it." I froze. "You what?" "He buried the case, of course. Bought witnesses, threatened the plaintiff. But I kept copies of everything." She paused. "I don't forget men like him." Neither did I. "Come by my house tomorrow," she said. "I'll show you what I still have, and maybe, just maybe, we can do something about this mess." The next afternoon, I sat in Loretta's kitchen, sipping weak tea while she laid out folders across the table. Typed statements. handwritten letters. One was from a former employee, a young woman who accused Thaddeus of selling forged antiques and threatening to ruin her family if she went public. She disappeared, Loretta said softly. Moved states, changed her name. I tried to keep in touch. I still have her original affidavit. The silence stretched between us. Rain tapped against the window, steady as a clock. You're not the first, Loretta said. But you might be the first not to vanish. I looked down at my lap, fingers wrapped tightly around my tea mug. For so long I had felt alone, screaming in a soundproof room. Now I wasn't. He's powerful, she continued. He's protected. But he's also arrogant. Men like him always overreach. What do I do now? You build your case, quietly, carefully, and when you're ready, you make it public. I nodded. It wasn't just about what happened to me anymore. It was about every woman who'd been silenced, every employee threatened, every record wiped clean. The napkin, the notebook, the witnesses, these were my matches. And I was done waiting in the dark. Savannah's public library had always been my hiding place, hushed, dust-scented, untouched by the winds outside. On that particular morning, it became something else. A war room. Loretta and I settled into the reading room tucked away behind a row of archives. Between us lay my notebook, the one Jasper had pushed back at me, the one I'd carried like a splinter under the skin. I used to write in it to cope. Now, under Loretta's guidance, I rewrote it to speak. We need to organize this chronologically, she said, flipping through the pages. Pattern is key. Without it, the defense will call these anecdotes not abuse. Together we combed through the ink-stained memories. There were entries from the first Hawthorne Thanksgiving I attended, how Thaddeus had handed me a carving knife and announced, "Let's see if the girl from nowhere knows how to serve." Jasper had laughed. I'd smiled then. I didn't now. We categorized everything: dismissive remarks, gaslighting, social isolation, sudden generosity followed by public humiliation. The necklace Thaddeus gave me for my birthday, only to tell guests it was a replica because she wouldn't know the difference anyway. It had all seemed disconnected, survivable. But together it formed a lattice of slow suffocation. This, Loretta said, tapping a particular entry about the party where I'd been hit, is your keystone. By mid-afternoon, we had built a timeline so detailed, so damning it no longer felt like mine. It read like a case. Because it was one. That night, I took a breath and sent an excerpt, redacted names but clear in tone, to 3 local newspapers. I accompanied it with a short letter. I didn't name Thaddeus, but I described the man patriarch of a prominent family collector of European antiques birthday party turned public spectacle. I included one sentence word for word, clean that up, made. Only one outlet responded. A young editor called me from a blocked number. Do you have proof? He asked, his tone neither hostile nor warm. I do, I said. And I sent him photos, a scanned page from the notebook dated and time-stamped. A photo of the silk napkin stained with blood and still creased from that night. He didn't reply. Not that day. But someone else did. Around 10:30 that night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. If you think a few scribbles and fabric stains can bring him down, the voice said slowly, deliberately, you'll find yourself out of Savannah before the month's up. Then the line went dead. I stood in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, silence ringing louder than the voice had. Minutes later, the lights in my apartment flickered, then died. The heat followed. I checked my account, utilities fully paid 2 months in advance. When I called the provider, the man on the line told me the shutoff was requested by the property manager. I hadn't made that request. The next morning, I found a single set of footprints in the dew on my welcome mat. They weren't mine. I packed a bag and knocked on Loretta's door by noon. I don't want to stay long, I told her, just until I figure something out. She handed me a cup of tea and motioned to a map spread across her dining table. I thought you might say that, she said. Take a look. It was a map of coastal Georgia. Pinned along the edge were printouts of property records. She pointed to a red circle drawn around a plot on Tybee Island. Transferred to a shell company 6 years ago, she explained. The kind of transaction you do when you don't want your name on anything. And what is it, I asked? A house. More of a compound. Used to be a private club. Now it's just forgotten. Why does it matter? She turned over a sheet of paper, an old whistleblower letter she'd received years back. It referenced off-the-books collections stored away on the coast. He kept things there, she said. Things he couldn't let anyone find. I stared at the name of the shell company, Redbridge Maritime Holdings. I'd seen that name once on a customs form in Thaddeus's office. If you want justice, Loretta said quietly, we have to go further. That night I sat beside her fireplace writing in my notebook. This isn't just about a family anymore. It's about the weight of silence. And I'm not writing for myself alone now. The road to Tybee Island was gray with winter mist. Pines swayed like sentries on either side, and the salt-heavy wind from the Atlantic pressed against the windshield. Loretta drove while I navigated the silence between us, thick but calm. We arrived just past noon. The estate was tucked behind a crumbling stone wall, the iron gate held shut by a rusted chain and padlock. The house beyond was grand and neglected its windows like shuttered eyes. Moss hung from the balcony railings, a place meant to be forgotten. We walked the perimeter, careful not to be seen. Through a side window, dirty but unboarded, I caught a glimpse inside. Wooden crates stacked high. Some bore the insignia of Italian shipping companies. Others were marked as 19th century Dutch imports, odd, considering they weren't listed on Hawthorne Antiques' records. I knew because I used to reconcile those inventories myself. Loretta took photos through the glass. On the wall inside, written in chalk above the crates, was a phrase, not for those who turn back. I've seen enough, I said, my voice low. We were halfway back to the car when we noticed the Range Rover parked across the road, angled to block our exit. A tall man emerged. He was lean, with streaks of gray in his beard and a tired stiffness in his shoulders. You're the one from the article, he said to me. The notebook woman. I nodded, unsure. My name's Gideon Crane, he said. I used to run his warehouse. Before he threw me out and tried to bury the audit I filed. He handed me a flash drive. It's all there, shipping manifests, altered certificates, even internal surveillance. I copied it the night before I was let go. Why now, I asked. He looked at Loretta, then back at me. Because you made noise, he said. And I've been waiting 5 years for someone to speak loud enough. I took the drive and held it tightly. If you go public, he added, I'll back it. On record. He left before we could ask more. We sat in the car stunned. By the time we got back to Savannah, night had fallen. A letter waited for me at Loretta's official legal notice delivered by courier. Thaddeus had made good on his threat. I was being sued. Defamation with malicious intent. Interference with economic relations. Civil damages sought high enough to ruin me. But worse than the amount was the attached statement, sworn testimony from a former housekeeper who claimed I'd fabricated mental instability for attention and once injured myself in a cry for help. I sat by Loretta's hearth, letter in hand. She read silently beside me, then reached for my wrist and squeezed gently. This kind of response, she said, means you've hit the nerve. Outside, the wind howled. The lights flickered, but held. I looked at the flash drive, then back at the fire. I won't back down, I whispered. Good, Loretta replied. Because it's time to burn down the lie. And this time I would not wait for permission to strike the match. The Venner House Hotel shimmered under garlands of white and gold, wrapped in the illusion of old money and new secrets. Outside, horse-drawn carriages lined the curb, their passengers stepping out in tuxedos and gowns, their laughter rising above the Christmas music echoing from the grand hall. It was the kind of night people photographed for legacy albums and donation brochures. I stood across the street in the drizzle, dressed in a simple black dress, hair pulled into a low knot. No earrings, no necklace, only a silk scarf tucked in my coat pocket and a flash drive hidden in the lining of my purse. Before I crossed, I opened my phone and tapped send. 3 files went out simultaneously to 3 investigative reporters at the Savannah Post. Each included scanned documents from Gideon's drive, falsified valuations, manipulated provenance reports, and signatures that belonged to Thaddeus Hawthorne. I set the emails on delay scheduled for 8:00 p.m., the exact moment he'd begin his opening remarks. Inside the ballroom glowed with soft lighting and oil paintings. The air smelled of champagne and polished mahogany. No one noticed me slip into the back row. I looked like a ghost in a room full of mirrors, present but unseen. Thaddeus stepped up to the podium poised beneath a crystal chandelier. He wore a charcoal suit, navy tie, and the calm certainty of a man who believed his history would outlast the truth. Hawthorne Antiques. He began, voice steady and amplified, is not merely a house of objects. We are custodians of memory. We restore not only artifacts but the soul of heritage. Applause, flashbulbs, a brief hush before the next lot. Then the first phones began to buzz. One by one, heads lowered, screens lit up, whispers spread. I could see the headline reflected in the eyeglasses of the man seated 2 rows ahead: forgery and fraud inside Hawthorne Antiques' hidden network. A woman in emerald green stood abruptly and left. Then a man in a white dinner jacket followed. Then 3 more. The air changed, not like a storm, but like a vacuum sucking out certainty. Thaddeus faltered. His fingers gripped the sides of the podium. Then came the moment I'd waited for. 2 men emerged from the side doors, blending at first with the waitstaff. But they didn't carry champagne. They wore federal badges. One walked up the steps, his shoes sharp against the marble. "Mr. Hawthorne," he said calmly, "you are being served with a summons to appear before the federal court regarding allegations of fraud, wire deception, and interstate trafficking of forged antiquities." He handed over the paper, then added, "Hawthorne, holding subsidiary accounts have been frozen pending further investigation." No one clapped. Thaddeus opened his mouth, tried to speak, but no sound came. He raised a trembling hand. "This is a smear campaign," he said, barely audible. "A personal vendetta." But no one was listening anymore. I rose and walked out the side exit. No one stopped me. No one even looked. Outside, the wind had picked up. I tucked the scarf tighter around my neck, each step steady. Loretta's voice playing softly in my mind. "Truth doesn't shout. It stands in light and waits for the brave to turn it on." Savannah was soaked in silver gray the next morning. Rain fell straight and hard, turning gutters into rivers and storefront awnings into drums. Every television in every cafe played the same footage on loop: Thaddeus Hawthorne being led out of his townhome in handcuffs at 6:17 a.m., face tight, eyes downcast. Hawthorne House was sealed by noon. Employees stood outside the iron gates in confusion. The company's name was abruptly pulled from an upcoming international auction. The once mighty logo embossed in every collector's catalog was now a stain. But the Hawthornes weren't done fighting. At 3:00 p.m., my mother called a press conference at the Camellia Club, standing beneath the family crest with her attorney beside her. Her voice was cool, her expression untouched. "Zinnia has long struggled with emotional instability," Evelina said. "This is not a whistleblower act, it's revenge." She was excluded from the inheritance for a reason. She produced a short surveillance clip, poorly cropped and heavily edited. It showed me in shadow throwing something at Thaddeus. "This is who she is," Evelina said. "Violent, unbalanced." But by the time her statement reached the local news, something else had already landed. Gideon had released a full audio recording, one made 2 weeks prior, when Evelina had secretly called him. "If you still have those documents," her voice said clearly, "name your price. I'll make it worth your while. This doesn't need to go public." Her tone had been sharp, familiar, desperate. News anchors played the call in full. Viewers heard every syllable. By evening, the tide had turned again. Reporters hounded Evelina as she left the club. Her attorney declined to answer. That night, the Camellia Club quietly removed her portrait from its founder's gallery. At Loretta's office the next morning, a letter awaited me. It was from Jasper. No envelope, just a folded sheet of cream paper. Zinnia. I didn't know. Not all of it. Maybe not any of it. I didn't ask. I let her speak for all of us. I told myself it was easier that way. I'm sorry. I don't expect anything. Just wanted to say that. Jasper. No return address. No phone number. Just ink and regret. That evening I returned to my old apartment. The lock turned smoothly untouched since the last time I left. The air inside was stale but familiar. Everything was where I had left it. On the kitchen table the silk scarf lay like a folded memory, still faintly stained. I picked it up. It had dried, stiffened. I didn't wash it. I didn't throw it away. Instead, I placed it in a shadow box mounted on the wall above the desk. Not as a trophy, not as a wound, but as a record. I sat by the window as the rain traced slow rivers down the glass. No music, no calls, just the hush of a storm. I thought of all the words people had flung at me, mad liar, ungrateful. None of them mattered now. I whispered to the silence more to myself than anyone else, I don't need the world to believe me. I just need to never again forget what I survived. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't closure. It was return. To self. To voice. To light. The aftermath came quietly. No headlines screamed anymore. No cameras waited outside any doors. Thaddeus Hawthorne was a name now associated with closed court files and forfeited prestige. Hawthorne Holdings dissolved its accounts. Its crest faded from donor walls, its presence quietly erased from the institutions it once funded. I didn't feel victorious. Not even relieved, really. Just weightless. As if someone had removed a stone from the pocket of a coat I'd worn too long. I moved into a small apartment near the Savannah River. From my window I could hear the whisper of waves brushing the docks. The brine-sweet wind slipped through the shutters and painted soft patterns on the whitewashed walls. It wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. It was mine. The defamation suit against me was formally dropped. Thaddeus's legal team issued a statement citing medical and legal complications as the reason for his indefinite withdrawal from public life. No apology, just quiet retreat. As for Evelina, the exile was social, not legal. The recording Gideon released had sealed that chapter. Savannah's elite turned with the cold efficiency of people who knew the value of public distance. Her seat on the Art Council was revoked. Several charity boards cut ties. Her name, once spoken with reverence, became something people didn't mention at all. Days passed with the rhythm of new routines, coffee by the water gallery, visits, sketching again. Then one afternoon a parcel arrived, no return address. Inside, a thick envelope of ivory paper sealed with wax the color of dried blood. I opened it slowly. The letter was handwritten in brown ink. The slant of the cursive was unmistakable. It was my mother's. Zinnia. There are things I cannot undo, things I can no longer justify. There was a time I feared losing everything so deeply I lost myself instead. I let silence be my shield. I let him speak louder than truth. That is my failure. If there ever comes a day you would sit with me not as daughter and mother, but as two women who have both known grief, I will be here. I read it 3 times. Folded it once, set it on the table beside a cold cup of tea. And then I remembered a rainy night long ago. I was 9. I had forgotten my wool cap at school. That winter had been sharp for Savannah. I'd cried that evening, embarrassed, cold. Hours later, Evelina came home soaked to the bone, having pedaled across town to buy a replacement from a night market vendor. She had said nothing, just placed the cap in my lap and walked away. That memory pulsed like a bruise under a sleeve, tender, confusing. I opened my old notebook, the one I hadn't touched since the storm began. The first page still held my adolescent handwriting. Never let them see you break, Mother once told me. But she had broken me. Not once, many times. Through silence, through absence disguised as elegance, through every nod she gave Thaddeus when he spoke over me. I sat with all of it. The hurt, the nostalgia, the ache that memory can carry, even when forgiveness isn't fully formed. Then I stood, put on my coat, and walked to the riverside cafe she mentioned in her letter. She was already there. Wearing a beige sweater I vaguely remembered from childhood photographs. No makeup, just time on her face. I didn't embrace her, I didn't call her mom. I sat, looked her in the eye. "You chose him," I said, voice steady. Again and again. Her eyes filled, but she didn't speak. She just nodded. And in that moment, the truth between us was finally mutual. "I forgive you," I said softly. "Not for your sake, but for mine, so I can stop carrying it." I reached into my bag and pulled out the small canvas Loretta had given me weeks ago, a single seagull flying low across the water, wings dipped in silver-gray light. I placed it gently in front of her. "This," I said, "is what I'm choosing to take with me." Then I stood, left the cafe, and walked out into the breeze laced with sea salt and espresso. No more fury, no more waiting for someone else to make me whole. Only space and breath. 6 months later, I unlocked the door to my new gallery on Jones Street for the first time. The sign above the entrance read, "The Folded Wing." Inside, the space was quiet, trimmed with reclaimed wood and natural light. No chandeliers, no curated illusions of grandeur. Just walls ready to hold what others once deemed unworthy. I built it to showcase works by artists the museums had ignored, painters, sculptors, printmakers with brilliance that didn't fit auction houses or legacy collections. Some were elderly, some had never sold a single piece. All of them had something to say. So did I. I had legally changed my name to Zinnia Everly. I no longer lived under the Hawthorne name or its inherited weight. I paid my own rent, filed my own taxes, managed shipments and permits and invoices. For the first time, I stood on a foundation I'd built without borrowed bricks. One morning, as I adjusted a piece near the front, a rain-washed portrait of a woman walking alone beneath a wide silk scarf, I noticed a small envelope on the reception desk. Inside was a handwritten letter, unsigned but unmistakably Jasper's. "Zinnia. I thought honor meant staying quiet. Now I know it also means knowing when silence protects the wrong things. I was afraid. I still am. But I hope wherever you are you've stopped carrying what I couldn't say. I'm sorry. No return address. Just his pen. Just his honesty too late." I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer beneath the register. I didn't respond. That afternoon, Loretta came by. She wore her signature silk scarf and smelled faintly of bergamot. I was mid-hang adjusting a frame that kept tilting ever so slightly. She watched the painting, said nothing for a while. Then softly, "You hung it here. The one with the scarf?" I nodded. She placed a small envelope beside me. Inside was a check community arts funding from a grant she quietly managed, and a single note. "I don't invest in art. I invest in voices." Later that evening, I sat at home by the open window. The river below moved slowly, twilight softening the water's surface like a held breath. A gull flew low, cutting the silence in wide arcs. I opened my old notebook one last time. The pages were mostly full now of names, sketches, hurt truths, fragments of a woman rebuilding herself. I turned to the final blank page, and I wrote, "I once used this notebook to hold all my pain. But today, I write something else. I lived. I spoke. I did not disappear." Then I put the pen down, closed the notebook for good. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not for anyone else, not as a shield or performance, but because the reflection in the glass belonged wholly to me. No one else's story, no one else's weight, just Zinnia, whole, free, Heard. Closing notes on character and symbolism. Zinnia Everly's arc completes a journey from invisible daughter to sovereign woman. She does not return to reclaim a place at a family table that never fed her spirit. Instead, she builds her own. Her gallery. The folded wing is not just a space for art. It is a quiet revolution, a place where silenced voices find form. The seagull painting becomes her totem, a creature in flight over uncertain tides, choosing freedom again and again. And the notebook closes not to forget, but to move beyond.